When we last left off, Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated, and his replacement is Andrew Johnson. So, Andrew Johnson has his own plan for Reconstruction. So, he has really three steps to it. One, he's going to give amnesty for Southerners, except for Confederate leaders and very wealthy plantation owners, who he very much dislikes. The wealthy plantation owners, he sees them as one of the biggest problems to the South. Two, he is going to recognize the governments of Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And three, he says the other states could re enter the Union when they wrote a new state constitution, elected a new state government, and repudiated their war debts, basically paid their own war debts off. They also had to ratify the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, and had to repeal their acts of succession. So his plan is a little more intense than Abraham Lincoln's is, but not really too much. Now, all 11 ex Confederate states actually quickly qualified for the functioning parts of the Union. None of the ex Confederate states, however, gave African American men the right to vote. And this is a problem for those radical Republicans. We also see that former Confederate leaders were even elected to Congress. And again, Congress is not going to stand for this. An angry Congress is going to refuse to seat the officials from ex Confederate states. And this is really setting up a war between Andrew Johnson and these radical Republicans. Southern legislatures are soon going to adopt black codes, which basically prohibit African Americans from renting or borrowing money to buy land. They also placed freedmen in form of semi bondage by basically forcing them to sign work contracts, basically an indentured service in this sense. They also prohibited African Americans from testifying against whites in court. So you can see how African Americans, even though they gain the fact that they cannot be slaves anymore. But really, the laws are starting to go against them, and it's going to impede their advancement in the United States. We also are going to see that the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and other white supremacy groups are going to be created to try to intimidate African Americans and white reformers. They're going to continually harass, lynch, and intimidate African Americans from living in the area, uh, destroy the schools that they had built, destroy homes that they had built, and try to intimidate them from even voting when some of the African Americans did get the right to vote. Now, President Johnson is going to veto a bill that renewed the service protection offered by the Freedmen's Bureau. All right. The Freedmen's Bureau was actually something that had been passed under Abraham Lincoln. Now, a civil rights bill that nullified the black codes and guaranteed full citizenship and equal rights to African Americans. And by this time, Congress basically had enough votes to override Johnson's vetoes, allowing them to take over Reconstruction. So the radical Republicans truly get enough members in Congress that Andrew Johnson is just going to be overran by the power of Congress. Congress is going to be led by a group of Republicans. Again, I keep calling them radical Republicans. And they're just very passionate about getting African Americans back to an equal status among whites. They were led by Thaddeus Stevens in the House of Representatives and Charles Sumner in the Senate. And these people are going to have huge amounts of power throughout this time. Now, radical Republicans wanted to revolutionize Southern society through an extended period of military rule. Now, during this military rule, African Americans would be free to exercise their civil rights. African Americans would be educated in schools operated by the federal government, and African Americans would receive land confiscated from the South's wealthy plantation owners, an idea often referred to as the 40 acres and a mule. This idea, however, does never does become reality in this sense, but you can see that the radical Republicans do have a plan to help African Americans survive during this time of crisis. Now, Congress is going to override President Johnson's veto and renewed the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau is was established in 1865 at the urging of President Lincoln to assist freedmen in the South. In 1866, its charter was renewed by Congress, and it helped freedmen find separated family members, helped teach freedmen to read and write. It also acted as legal advocates for the freedmen. Now, critics believed it prevented the freedmen from learning how to be independent by giving them too much assistance, and eventually funding cuts and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan is going to severely weaken the agency itself. So it is going to naturally kind of die out. But this program very much helped African Americans during the late 1860s. In 1872, its charter was not renewed by Congress. Congress is going to override Johnson's veto and pass the 1866 Civil Rights Act. The act was the first to attempt to define citizenship and stated that all citizens have equal protection under the law. Now, obviously, this is eventually going to turn into the 14th Amendment. So in 1866, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, which states that all people born and naturalized in the United States are United States citizens with full rights and are entitled to due process. This is going to be ratified in 1868. So the 14th Amendment is a very, very important amendment. Now, even though some former Confederate states have been allowed to rejoin the Union by President Lincoln and Johnson, Congress only recognizes the state government in Tennessee. So again, there is this issue between who Congress recognizes and who the presidency recognizes. So Congress only recognizes Tennessee. In order for the former Confederate states to re-enter the Union, under Congress's and radical Republicans, they had to pass a state constitution that guaranteed African American voting rights or suffrage. They had to ratify the 14th Amendment, and they had to agree that former Confederate leaders could not hold office. So again, the radical Republicans are going to have a much stiffer way to get back into the Union. The 1867 Military Reconstruction Acts divided former Confederate states, with the exception of Tennessee, into 5 military districts and placed them under military rule to ensure the civil rights of freedmen. Military rule lasted between about 1 and 9 years, depending on the state. And you can see the different districts here. Virginia was in the first district. North Carolina and South Carolina was in the second district. District 3 was made up of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. District 4 was made up of Kansas and Mississippi. And District 5 is made up of Texas and Louisiana. Now, in 1867, Congress again is going to override Johnson's veto. As you can see, Johnson isn't having a lot of luck with this Congress. He overrides the Tenure of Office Act. This act prohibited the president from removing any federal official without the consent of Senate. Okay. And a few months after that, the law was passed. President Johnson fired the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. So this causes a huge uproar within Congress. The wording of the law made it unclear if Johnson actually broke the Tenure of Office Act, but nonetheless, the House of Representatives adopted 12 articles of impeachment against Andrew Johnson. Only 3 presidents in history have been impeached: Johnson, Clinton, and Trump. So Johnson was the first American president to be impeached. Now, in order to convict Johnson, the Senate needed 2/3 of its members, or basically 36 senators, to find him guilty. 35 senators voted guilty, while 19 senators voted not guilty. So Johnson is acquitted, but while Johnson remained president, he spent his final months unable to control Congress. That is part 2 of the Reconstruction. On the next class, we will look at the presidency of Ulysses S. Grant. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.